Welcome to On Work and Revolution, where we talk about what's shaking up in the world of work and edtech. I'm your host, Debbie Goodman. I'm CEO of Jackhammer Global, a global group of executive search and leadership coaching companies. I'm also an advisor to venture-backed edtech founders. And for those of you in edtech who are hiring, we have launched a fractional leaders offering. I'll put the link in the show notes. My main mission with all of my work is to help companies and leaders to create amazing workplaces where people and ideas flourish, which is why I'm really glad to have my guest here today, Katelyn Donnelly, and you'll understand why in a second. So Katelyn is the managing partner of Avalanche VC, an early stage venture firm investing in the trends that transform how people learn, earn, and own. Now, that's a phrase one doesn't hear very often, and we're going to be digging into that in a bit. Katelyn started her career as a consultant at McKinsey. She then moved on to Pearson, where she co-founded and served as the managing director of Pearson Ventures, which is a $65 million venture fund investing in global edtech companies. And then a few years later, she co-founded Delivery Associates, the leading public sector advisory and technology firm. She served on the board of the company for 10 years. She grew the organization from 0 to 200 or so employees, serving clients globally. So Katelyn is no stranger to scaling startups. And today we're going to be talking to Katelyn about her strong views about the future of work, namely that the future is freelance, or in my language, fractional. So welcome, Katelyn.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so firstly, I love how you describe Avalanche VC's investment thesis or strategy, investing in companies that transform how people learn, earn, and own. So elaborate on this for listeners.
I tried to think about what was it that would make people successful throughout history and today. And I think everybody goes through the same journey in a capitalist society. They have to learn in
Hmm.
school, but also outside of school. And then they learn to earn. So find a way to earn income. And then they turn that income into ownership in valuable assets. And so they can either do that by starting their own business, by getting shares in the company that they work for, by owning their home, or getting retirement assets. But that progression from learning, earning to owning is universal. And there's now nuanced ways of ownership that are actually quite important, such as owning your data, digital identity, potentially cryptocurrency, credentials in your own wallet that I think are really exciting. And given the sort of universal applicability of those three themes, I thought there was a tremendous amount of innovative ideas and system change to invest behind.
I really love that idea as you were talking about learn, earn, and then the own part. I think there's been somewhat of a disconnect in society, certainly amongst sort of your millennial and then Gen Z, certainly coming into the workplace and starting to question how can they afford a home? How can they ever hope to buy the biggest asset that's been the common denominator as or the core foundation of what most people consider to be I'm going to earn in order that I can own at least my home. And so I love what you're saying that we should think about ownership in many dimensions.
Exactly.
Okay, so you said there's so many companies in your portfolio and as well so many different nuances to what could be included in your thesis. I'd love to hear about the types of companies that you're investing in.
Yeah. So I'm now on my second fund. My first fund, we had 36 companies that spanned learn, earn, own. Some of the breakouts of that portfolio included a company called Prisms of Reality, which is a math curriculum in VR. And they were really capitalizing on the idea that the way people learn math is using spatial reasoning and applying problems to real world settings. And the
Hmm.
best way to do that is using immersive reality. So it's a great example of one of our Avalanche themes, which is efficacious edutainment, which is that you can measure the learning outcomes while using best in class technology systems.
You have got some of the coolest phrases to describe your to describe your investment strategy, thesis, and companies. I just love it. Okay, so what motivates you to invest? What is the rubric that you use to determine whether a company, first of all, is going to be a good fit based on the philosophy that you have? It sounds like you're very mission driven in one respect, but also that it's going to be a successful company.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say we look at two main things. First is we look at the founder and the founding team. And the first question I always ask is, who are you and why are you doing this? Because we look for people who are building their life's work. They understand the industry really well. They've seen the way it's developed, and they think that they have a very unique, differentiated take and solution and technology that they want to will into the world. And on that founding team, um, we also have a mantra, which is technology is built by technologists. So either the one founder or the second founder or somehow in the founding team, there has to be technology or an innovation at its core, which means that the company will have a distinctive edge when they go to market and they can serve customers in a unique way. I'd say the biggest reason I often pass on a company or don't think that it's a fit for the portfolio is it just looks a lot like everything else on the market, or it's something that is not truly defensible and it's very competitive. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad business or that company won't be
Mm.
successful. It's just not a good fit for venture capital, which is we're looking for companies that can potentially take our dollars and scale it to be $1 billion company and drive 100x return for our portfolio. So that level of ambition and vision and tech change all has to be there, which is pretty rare.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask a few things about that. First of all, you mentioned that you're looking for a founder where this is, or founding team, where this is really their life's work. They're birthing this, they're taking this to the world, and they usually believe very strongly in what they're creating and the impact that it can have in society, and they're changing the world. What do you actually give honest feedback to founders who've pitched to you about the fact that actually what they're doing is a bit also ran, it's a bit average, it's a bit the same as everybody else? How do you break that news to people?
I just tell them directly, and I usually couch it in been an angel I've been an investor for a long time. I've been an angel investor at 36 companies, my first portfolio. We've definitely had my share of failures, and I usually couch it in saying, "Look, I've been there. I've lost money trying to do what you're doing, and this is just my honest take on how I see things." And I found that founders really respect it because
Yeah,
people don't really wanna waste their time, and so few people are giving them honest feedback, and
exactly.
I'm usually not saying, "I think you're terrible," or "This is like a out of you're like out of line," especially because my blueprint for working with founders is that I'm a former founder myself. I worked with co-founded a company with Sir Michael Barber to bring his IP around deliverology to market and scale it. And we didn't ever raise any money. We bootstrapped it entirely. I've seen all the like ups and downs and the ways that you can go wrong. And I really say that it's coming from a place of empathy as a founder myself and wanting to see people be successful.
Yeah, I just want to double down on this. I'm a startup founder myself. I've started several companies. Some have have not really seen too much of the light of day because they were just not that great ideas. But it's you don't always get good feedback or direct feedback or accurate feedback from the people that you're pitching to. So I hope there are many more people like you out there who can deliver, even if it's news that you don't really want to hear, but that can certainly, as a founder, you can use that. And either you're going to continue to improve and enhance, or you're going to pivot, or maybe you're just going to keep on doing the same old. Maybe somebody else will decide to invest. But if there are other investors out there listening to this, please give direct feedback as a founder. That's what we really want. Okay, and then there's another thing that I want to ask you about. So you said you like make sure that there's a technologist on the founding team. What about how important is it to you that there's also somebody who is sales and revenue driven? Because I've spoken to a number of investors who will not invest if the founding team, A, doesn't have somebody who's proficient at sales or is prepared to do it and is prepared to get good at it.
Yeah, I agree. It's sales or like who is your customer and product. Like those two are the only things that matter. And usually there is a relation like a symbiotic relationship between the two and they feed on each other, but you have to have both.
Okay. So let's change tack now because I really want to get into a point that you spoke about when we spoke earlier, which is the future is freelance. You're pretty strong in your view about the future of work or the future of employment, that it is going to be freelance, or in my language, I call it fractional. Tell me more. Why are you so convinced about this?
I think it's fractional, freelance, flexible. These are all human desires that we see increasing in every subsequent generation and in the 21st century. And they're things that people are requiring to integrate into their lives. And I think we saw it a lot through COVID, and then we now see it in the data. So in the U.S., you can look at the business labor statistics (BLS), and the average amount of time that someone spends in a job has gone from an average of 10 years to now I think it's like 2.1
Hmm.
or something. And so people are
Yeah.
already switching jobs pretty regularly. And I think it's a pretty natural transition to then turn that into more fractional roles. And there's strong demand on the employee side, and then I think there's also demand on the employer side that is beginning to think about, how do I get outcome oriented labor
Hmm.
force? How do I minimize liability? This sort of the last during the COVID era, I think many employers and workplaces really dialed up we're going to give our employees all these extra things and really make them feel like family and build a community. And then in the last year, with the rise of layoffs at many of the companies that really overhired, people both employers and employees realized overnight that they weren't family, that, like,
I know.
they could just wake up and have all of their logins just
Overnight.
terminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that project or that initiative that they thought that they'd been told was so important that they were working on, that was a priority to management, obviously had been cut. And so I think that we want agency, and we want to be able to own our own destiny. And it's clear that corporations are likely not the venue in which to do. But there are different relationships that you can have with them, because to do big things in the world, you need to coordinate humans at scale. But there are many mechanisms of doing that. And I think freelance, flexible arrangements, outcome oriented pieces are a perfect way of doing it. And I saw this on the front lines when I was building Delivery Associates. So Delivery Associates is a professional services firm that works with governments to drive big reform programs. And we were a remote first company. So there were no physical offices, and we had
Hmm.
people on every continent except Antarctica all over the world. And then there were quite a few fractional people as well. I think at least like 40% of our employees were fractional or flexible, and we got tremendous value out of that. And even a consultancy itself, like Delivery Associates, is fractional labor to work with the
Hmm.
government on a very specific skill set. So, like the consulting industry's professional services have really boomed, and there's so many layers to that sort of freelance cake that is just obviously what's already happening and will probably continue.
I agree, which is why we launched a new division in addition to our full time executive search division, because absolutely we saw the need from both sides, from the founder side that needed to hire high level skills, but now budgets are under strain. And so you can hire somebody for just the work that you actually need them to do at a very high level at a much more affordable budget and get a piece of their time. And then many more people, experienced, highly skilled workers who want to have the flexibility. Not everybody's cut out for that. So we definitely are seeing that what employers want, what founders want, is they want somebody who either knows how to work fractional and can teach them how to work with a fractional leadership team, because it doesn't necessarily come naturally, or somebody who either they have the fractional experience, or they're able to really cut to the chase and become you call it outcome oriented really quickly. And I think that's the key, is that what we're seeing in this fast moving world is that we don't have a lot of luxury of time of sitting around and thinking up the strategy and getting things all nice and pretty and tied with a bow before we actually get into the weeds and into the work. We've got to be moving a lot quicker. And so where I'm seeing that where fractional execution is playing a big part is senior people with high level skills who can cut to the chase, who've got the experience and who can just get into the weeds right now, and founders who can learn to work with people like that as part of their leadership teams are accelerating their growth really well. So we're talking the same language. You also spoke about some other key trends that were top of mind for you. And I want to refer back to a statement you said, that everyone is an entrepreneur or needs to learn to think like one. What about people who just want to go to a workplace and get a salary and don't want to be entrepreneurial at all?
Then those people will probably be they will be beholden to their employers and the sort of forces of the larger labor market. And that can be it when it's a boom time, that could be great. And when it's
Hmm.
not, then they could find themselves unemployed or maybe not as valued as like their compensation or their structures may not be as high as they would be if they took a more proactive approach. And it's okay if I think that one of the things to think about is, like, how you define entrepreneurialism. Even to
Hmm.
be a good employee, so like a full-time employee usually requires an understanding of how am I successful in this workplace? Like, what do I have to do to be a good employee? And that usually has some element of entrepreneurialism, whether it's like finding a way to make your boss look good, like going above and beyond on a special project, like hitting your sales target out of the water by innovating on a script or finding a best practice and really applying it rigorously. But those sort of behaviors compound over time, and the people that they're compounding for will be excellent. And those that sit back on their laurels and think, "Oh, I just want a job," will probably be stagnant in their roles.
Yeah, I agree that there is a shift and a move towards the gig economy has been coming on for a long time. What do you think needs to change in certainly American education system or just society at large in order to prepare people for what is essentially a future that with AI co-pilots and AI support and AI augmentation and all the technology that we know is coming down the stream, is going to mean that there is greater fragmentation of our jobs, that we stay at workplaces for much shorter times, and that we're going to need to be able to be a lot more nimble and flexible in the modes in which we work. Maybe sometimes full time, maybe sometimes gig or freelance or fractional, but the system underpinning that is currently not really preparing all that many people for that future.
Yeah, it's interesting when you speak to younger people or the younger generation, because I actually think that they really get it more than the adults. And it's like the existing sort of legacy education systems that have people who've never worked in the modern economy. Like most universities have professors who have jobs that honestly have gone the way of the dodo. Like, you can't get it, like, getting a tenured academic job, like, that doesn't really exist as much anymore at a stable institution, and being an adjunct or a teaching professor, these are some of the most, like, lowest paid jobs now because of the economics of higher education, and yet those are the people who are educating
Right.
young people. But what I think young people really get is they see the creator economy, they see influencers, they're playing video games where there are digital goods and services that are being sold to them. And they can operate in those digital economies and find ways of monetizing assets. And so I think starting a newsletter and beginning to place ads on it, doing videos on YouTube and getting ad revenue, building a community around something that you're passionate about, and then putting a marketplace that allows your community to transact with each other and taking a cut. These are all digital native job business models
Mm.
that the world is showing to young people, and they, I think, get it more than the older generation. But I think the key is to not like for the sort of like adults and the system among us to not force the old model and the old regime on young people.
I will definitely support that statement. I've got 2 teenagers at high school, and I see how digitally native they are in the way that they go about solving problems and getting access to information and promoting the stuff that they're interested in. So it is definitely a different world of that generation that's emerging into the college system, which I know there's efforts to transform, but they are just such slow-moving beasts. So we'll wait and see on that point to see what emerges in the next, I'd say, 2 to 3 years. If the college system as a whole doesn't really make some significant advances, I think the rest of the world's just gonna move on too quickly. So let's put a pin in that and revisit in a little while.
It's too expensive for I just wanna make
Yeah,
one point, which is that it's just too expensive for what it is. Like, the ROI, you used to be able to go to a degree program and be able to amortize that over your career, and
right.
now the ROI is so disconnected from the job market, and the investment is so high, it just doesn't make economic sense.
Yes, indeed. I am the mother of two teenagers who
Yeah.
are about to need to get into college at some point, or maybe not. Maybe we'll do something different. Okay, Caitlin, I want to ask you, what advice would you give founders right now? It's Q1 2024, emerging into Q2. It's a tough and brutal landscape for anybody who's looking for money, capital, anybody who's maybe got their first bit of capital, but they're struggling with growth. What advice can you give?
My advice is to really think about what it is that you're trying to achieve with your company and take a hard look at whether what you have is truly serving the needs of a customer. And if not, like maybe take a step back or decide that like it's okay to decide it's not for you.
Mhm.
And the sooner that you like most startups, especially at an early stage, have a hypothesis that they need to prove out. And if you've gone through all the motions and you haven't been able to prove that hypothesis, particularly any like inflection point of a super high growth, then it's okay to declare failure. And you don't have to s- see it to the end. And so I would just have I think that, like, having honest conversations about your capabilities and your customer and what and where your product is really important, and if you need to make changes, make them fast and make them
Mhm.
dramatic and make sure that the people who are on your core team, like the founders, have enough of the skills to be able to serve the need and they're fully aligned on, making the sacrifices probably necessary in order to continue to be at a startup. I think in the last couple of years, there was so much money. There's this idea that almost anyone could start a company and that being a founder was like a job. Like people were paying themselves like sometimes quite like founder salaries were like $100,000 or higher, and I think that those days are just over and you have to get to that product market fit or that growth trajectory or that sort of very distinctiveness quickly or you're not going to be able to be successful.
Which nobody wants to hear, but I think possibly in framing it around the opportunity costs of continuing on a path that doesn't either change radically or maybe stop and start again with something else. The opportunity cost of sticking with something a little too long. We think we've been indoctrinated to believe that we're not quitters.
Yeah.
I've certainly been there numerous times where I'm like, I really love my product, but nobody wants to buy it.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, we're done here. And it is such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to call it. And then the opportunity cost, if I would have stuck with that too long, of not going, okay, that was a great idea. Let's start. Let's think. There are so many great ideas out there. Let's just start with something else that's fresh and that maybe gets traction a little quicker. So that's good advice. It's harsh and brutal, but man, Caitlin, you're really direct with your feedback. All right. What are you most excited about for the investment landscape in the year ahead?
It's impossible to predict because I want to be surprised. I'm excited about the things that I don't see that some brilliant entrepreneur sees and brings to my attention. So it's like the serendipity and the like venture into the unknown, which I'm most excited about. I think the landscapes of learn, earn, own are all open. And obviously, AI has surged ahead, and that's an exciting trend. But I think some of the more interesting plays are the way that legacy institutions have to be reformed or changed, and the technology companies that can be built to capitalize or deliver on like the missions of those legacy institutions that we need in our society that are currently not being served today.
I love the idea of serendipity as well as transformation, wholesale transformation of legacy. May there be tons of that coming your way. And have an amazing rest of 2024. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging around all the way to the end. It would mean the world if you would rate and review on Work and Revolution on your favorite listening app. It helps people know that the show is worth listening to, and so I'll really appreciate that. Thank you so much.